The following program, NORML Show Live, is intended for responsible adults only. We advocate for the repeal of marijuana prohibition for adults. We discuss the science, culture, and controversy about America's marijuana laws. We do not advocate or encourage any illegal activity and advise all listeners to learn their state and federal marijuana laws by visiting NORML.org, NORML.org. Opinions and claims made by guests and advertisers of NORML Show Live are their own and do not necessarily reflect the philosophy and policies of NORML. Listener discretion is advised.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
From the promise of legalization.
And I think we need to rethink and recriminalize our marijuana laws.
To the agony of prohibition.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
The National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws presents NORML Show Live, Marijuana Nation. Now, here's your host, NORML's Outreach Coordinator, Radical Russ Belville.
Good afternoon, tokers and tokettes. It is Tuesday, December 7th, 2010, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in this world. Welcome to our podcast here and our live show taking place here at Rolla J Studios in beautiful Potland, Oregon. We also want to give a very solemn thanks to all of our veterans who may be remembering Pearl Harbor Day today. The Japanese attacked the U.S. Navy at Pearl Harbor 69 years ago today. There are still some veterans in their late 80s, 90s, and even in approaching 100 that are still alive and remember that day. For those of you who are like me, too young to remember the day, imagine the attacks of September 11th, 2001, and then take that back 69 years, and that's kind of what they are feeling. So remember our veterans and remember Pearl Harbor Day today. Also joining us in our studio is Ganja John, our engineer.
I forgot to turn my cell phone off, sorry.
Happens to the best of us. Glad to have you here. And also joining us from our virtual studio in Astoria, Oregon is Cannabis Carrie.
Hello, boys.
Oh,
and all the stashers out there.
Glad to have you here, Carrie. We've got quite a show for today, for Tuesday. Of course, today is our Electric Tuesday for our Daily Toker Tunes. We'll be bringing you some music from a group called Home Video and a song called The Smoke. It's very appropriate for our show here. At 5:30, we're going to give you some audio from Governor Gary Johnson. He's been in the news lately, been interviewed by the Weekly Standard and pointing out that he'd used marijuana between 2005 and 2008. We're going to give you his opinions on marijuana and legalization as he expressed them in his keynote speech at the NORML National Convention this year, NORML National Conference in Portland, Oregon. That's coming up at 5:30. And then at 45 past, we're going to talk with Dan Vietz. He's a member of the NORML Board of Directors as well as the coordinator of Missouri NORML. There's a terrible case going on down there in Missouri of asset forfeiture. The DEA and U.S. Attorney's Office are trying to seize a very popular campground that's used for all sorts of music festivals like the Schwagstock Music Festival. We'll talk all about asset forfeiture with Dan Vietz at 45 past. But before we get to all of that, we start with our hemp headlines and Cannabis Carrie. What's in the news today?
Well, the news today, I'm taking you around the world. We're getting a little continental. All of our stories today are cannabis-related stories from outside of the U.S. We're going to go to the Netherlands, also a little blurb on the Mexican war, drug war down south of our borders. We're also going to go to the U.K. for our U.K. listeners, and we've got some Canadian news on a bill that's making its way through the Canadian Parliament.
I always love taking these trips around the world. The world of cannabis reaches far and wide, and we'll get all those headlines right after this first break. Also reminding folks, we're raising money this week for our bandwidth at KushCon. We're going to be bringing you 3 days of live coverage of the largest marijuana expo in the world ever, they're telling me. We've got Ed Rosenthal's latest book, Marijuana Grower's Handbook, signed by Tommy Chong, who wrote the foreword, and Keith Stropp, who wrote the introduction. We're auctioning this off. Send your email to stash@norml.org with your bid. We'll tell you what the highest bids are when we come back.
You're listening to NORML Show Live, the voice of the marijuana nation. You want to legalize it? Call your congressman today. 202-224-3121. It's free, it's easy, and you don't even have to give your name, just your zip code, and they'll hook you up to your congressman. Call 202-224-3121 and tell Congress you support marijuana legalization.
Liberate your mind. Liberate your mind.
Medical marijuana, industrial hemp, consumer cannabis. It's time for this week's NORML News with Cannabis Carrie.
The longtime home of the High Times Cannabis Cup, the Netherlands, has been famous for tolerating cannabis possession, its use, and the coffee shops that sell it mostly to tourists in the Dutch state. Legalization activists have long held the Netherlands up as a shining example of what tolerant cannabis laws can do. The Dutch have half the use rates of both cannabis and hard drugs and half the use rates among teens as the United States. But a new policy has been percolating up through a new, more conservative government whose goal is to push a strict ban on cannabis use, especially among tourists. About 70% of the Dutch coffee shop business is foreigners from countries where cannabis is more restricted. A ban on foreigners in the coffee shops was even upheld by the Court of the European Union that ruled that the ban was legal, even with the free trade and travel agreements among its member nations. The new Dutch rules include a cannabis pass that is only available to Dutch citizens. Now, a Tilburg University researcher, Nicole Malstis, has concluded that the new ban would have the opposite of its intended effect, leading to more crime. It's easy to see that tourists will still come to sample hash and cannabis, but will now simply come to look for street dealers. In addition, Dutch citizens may not want to be registered as official cannabis users to get their pass, and they may also go back to the black market street dealers to obtain marijuana. The Dutch citizens, long known to value their privacy, will most likely start paying the higher price on the streets that then register to get into a coffee shop. The upheld foreign tourist ban will get an appeal hearing on December 16th, and as always, we will keep you posted.
Yeah, as usual, the unintended consequences of any sort of prohibition. You cannot repeal the laws of supply and demand. People want to go to the Netherlands. And they want to enjoy their hashish or their marijuana in a coffee shop. And this is a system that's been working just fine. These fears of the tourists are completely overblown. I mean, I was reading one story that was saying, I think it was in Maastricht, they were saying 70% of their of the business in the coffee shops is coming from foreigners from Belgium or France. Again, it's not a problem with the tolerant policy in the Netherlands. It's a problem with the prohibition in Belgium, in France, in Denmark, in Germany, and all these countries around the Netherlands. There's no way you're going to stop the tourism to Amsterdam in seeking out the hashish and marijuana. And so long as it's tolerated for the locals, that will maintain a market enough to keep the growers growing and dealing out in the streets, just like the researcher said. People are going to come to Amsterdam. They're going to seek out the street weed. The people who live in the Netherlands aren't going to want to have to register for something that they've been doing for free all these years. They're going to go out to the streets to save their own privacy. It's a lose-lose situation. Stick with the toleration you have now and work on spreading the doctrine of tolerance to the other countries in the European Union. That's the solution to the problem.
A Mexican woman police chief who vowed to take on drug cartels has been shot dead after only 2 months on the job. Hermilia Garcia, a 36-year-old, was killed by several gunmen as she drove to work in the town of Mesquite outside Chihuahua City in the northern part of the country. Garcia, who did not carry weapons or have bodyguards, was one of the small but increasingly number of women to take on top police jobs because men have been too afraid of reprisals by criminal gangs. She was fond of saying, quote, "If you don't owe anything, you don't fear anything," when asked why she had no security. A lawyer by profession, Garcia was commended for her bravery as she pledged to tackle the drug wars plaguing her community and the one that was responsible now for almost 30,000 deaths in the last 6 years. Her murder has been interpreted as a warning to other women who have stepped up to take an active role in law enforcement. One such woman, a 20-year-old, Marcel Valles Garcia, no relation, has just become the police chief of Praxis in Juarez Valley. Even the recent arrest of thousands of gang members in Chihuahua by the Mexican government, celebrated last month as a victory in the war against the drug cartels, has only provoked a wave of violent crimes as the jobless young men who become soldiers in the powerful cartels have killed thousands. Hermilia Garcia was only the latest victim in this horrible drug war.
It's going to continue. We're going to see more and more victims of this drug war. The violent cartels, the drug gangs, they don't care who the police chief is. They don't care if it's a man or a woman. You could put, an 87-year-old woman in crutches as the police chief. They wouldn't care. They'd gun her down in the street. You could make a 6-year-old kid the police chief. They wouldn't care. They'd gun him down in the street. The case is here that under a prohibitionary market, all turf battles, all business problems, all conflicts with both the law and with other dealers are solved with violence. This is the way it is. It's the way it's going to be. No matter how brave these women are that want to step up, and I guess I got to commend them on wanting to try to save their country or save their local town and their own citizens. But again, it's a suicide mission to want to go up against these well-armed, well-financed drug cartels. It's a losing battle until we legalize marijuana in the United States, take away the cultivation and trafficking jobs from the Mexicans, and give it back to Americans. We can have a growth industry, pardon the pun, right here in America, and we can cut down on the violence in Mexico in one fell swoop if anyone was just brave enough to go forward with full legalization.
UK government ministers will no longer be required to seek the advice of scientists when making drug classification policy in the future under new government proposals. A bill that was published last week contains an amendment to the Constitution of the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs that would remove the requirement on the Home Secretary to appoint at least 6 scientists to the committee. The bill, called the Police Reform and Social Responsibility Bill, is getting criticized for the government's treatment of scientific evidence. The amendment to the Misuse of Drug Act from 1971 would allow the Home Secretary to place temporary controls on substances for a year. Doctors and scientists have already voiced concern over the government's treatment of scientific data after the Advisory Council fired its chairman, scientist David Nutt, for publicly criticizing politicians in the UK for distorting research evidence to further their agendas. He was vocal about a study that claimed alcohol and tobacco were more harmful than some illegal drugs like cannabis, LSD, and ecstasy. Currently, the council that sets public policy on issues of illegal drugs is required to have a membership that includes representatives of medicine, dentistry, and pharmacy, along with a member of the pharmaceutical industry and a chemist. It also includes people with expertise on the social problems connected with drug use. The law that was passed in 1971 was considered way ahead of its time to demand scientific expertise when it comes to social policy making. Evan Harris, a former Liberal MP and campaigner for evidence-based social policies, said that the solution to the poor relationships that scientists and Home Office ministers have had is for both just to follow their codes of practice, not for the ministers to seek to abolish science advisors. The director of the Campaign for Science and Engineering, Irene Khan, said that it is incredible that the government is trying to go back to a time to when the minister knows best theory of governing, saying that scrapping the need for expertise on drug advice is not only bad scientists, it's terrible politics. Crime Reduction Minister James Brokenshire disputes the claims that the government is moving away from scientific advice in their approach to the nation's drug use, saying that removing the requirement on the Home Secretary to appoint specific areas of expertise will allow them greater flexibility in the expertise that they will be able to draw on. Scientists, after the firing of David Nutt, drafted guidelines that would have enhanced confidence in the scientific advisory system by calling on the government to guarantee that any advice they offered to help make policy would remain free from political interference. So it came as a surprise to the group that drafted those guidelines that the new proposal would do away altogether with the requirement for scientists, especially given the recent history of the knee-jerk reactions like the one that put David Nutt out of a job.
What's the problem, Mr. Minister? Oh, well, here's the problem. Every time we ask these scientists about drugs, they keep telling us the things we don't want to hear. That's what's really going on here. They're not getting the answers they like, so, well, let's just scuttle the science. Can't really blame the UK. They're learning well from what we do here in the United States. We don't pay attention to any of the science when it comes to our drug policy. Why should the UK? I mean, we've got scientific studies going back to 1974 showing that cannabinoids have a promise in fighting cancer cells, in possibly curing cancer. But never mind that. We can't have scientists saying that, cannabis might not be that dangerous to use, or it might not be as addictive as people say, or in the case of David Nutt, where he said using ecstasy is less dangerous than horse riding, which if you look at the statistics is absolutely true. Now, it reminds me of Colonel Jessup. You can't handle the truth. You don't want the truth. You don't want the scientists educating people on the truth about cannabis and other sorts of soft drugs, because you realize that the science does not support your agenda, trying to scare the hell out of British youth with stories of cannabis smoking mums that stab themselves to death and the dreaded killer skunk that's going to leave you addicted after just one hit. It's poppycock, it's balderdash, it's a whole bunch of other things that British people might say. It's ridiculous and it needs to end. The UK did the right thing in requiring scientific input on drug policies. And what the Home Secretary is trying to say now about, it will open up it'll open them up to have more choices if they don't have to pick people with specific expertise. Yeah, that's exactly like what we saw in the Bush administration, where they shopped around and finally found the 2 or 3 scientists who would speak against global climate change. That's what they're going to do in the UK. They're going to shop around until they can find the 2 or 3 quacks that are willing to buy in to their anti-cannabis agenda. We're not going to stand for it. The people of the UK are not going to stand for it. The people of the US are not going to stand for it. We want scientific, reasonable interpretation of the use of drugs, the social policies surrounding drugs, and the criminal policies surrounding drugs. Thank you.
Canada is considering a new bill that would amend Canada's Controlled Drugs and Substances Act with mandatory minimum sentences for pot offenses and increase the maximum, in some cases, to life behind bars. Canada's Bill S10 would throw growers in jail for 6 months for 5 plants, and as activists are warning, the passage could also lead to a complete overhaul of Canada's criminal justice system, jails, and ultimately to their freedom-loving culture. The bill has many Canadian activists alarmed as it is being debated in the Canadian Senate currently, that is dominated by conservative members. It looks now like it will most likely pass there and head to the House of Commons for readings, debate, and a final vote. With wording like, quote, trafficking for the benefit of a criminal organization, unquote, holding heavy fines and jail time leaves some legal experts to say that it can be conceivably applied to many activities of cannabis consumer groups, like passing a joint between members of cannabis activist groups. Carrying a weapon while selling marijuana holds enhanced penalties as well, to 1 year in jail, mandatory minimum. Activists point out that a stick or even a personal mace container that women often carry in their purses could be considered to be a weapon. And now if you were caught selling cannabis near a school or involving in any way a person under the age of 18 would lead to a 2-year minimum prison sentence. Bill S10 also goes after the many mom and pop style cannabis operations that are prevalent in many areas of Canada that would sentence them to a mandatory minimum of 3 years if they could prove that they grew at least 500 plants for the purpose of trafficking. Now, the Canadian courts have already ruled that a small seedling or clone will be counted the same as the full-grown plant. The bill was introduced in 2009 and was largely panned by groups such as the John Howard Society, a group that has been in Canada since the 1930s. They urged Parliament to drop it before the debates, since mandatory minimum sentences, particularly when they involve long periods of incarceration, are incompatible with the fundamental principle of sentencing, specifically that the sentence must be proportionate to the gravity of the offense and the degree of responsibility of the offender. As such, they are liable to give rise to inhumane sentences. The Canadian Bar Association agrees with them, saying that the passage of Bill S10 would not be an effective deterrent to crime, and ultimately the new law would not achieve its intended goal for greater public safety. With mandatory sentencing for drug crimes, judges will be stripped of their power to make a compassionate ruling. They are calling a stop to creating a U.S.-style war against drugs that has proved ineffectual south of their border.
Gosh, I guess there just must not be enough prison guard jobs in Canada that we have to do this little make-work program called mandatory minimum sentencing. I mean, that's the way it's worked out here in America. We lead the whole world in people incarcerated. 2.3 million people behind bars, almost half of those for drug-related offenses, and a massive increase in the prisoner population that began in the mid-1980s when the Democratic Congress, headed up by Tip O'Neill, created the mandatory minimums that were signed off on by Republican President Ronald Reagan. It worked so well here in America. Gosh, it's going to work great in Canada too. I sure hope you're ready for all those great prison jobs that are coming up. And don't forget all the prison laundry jobs and the construction jobs. By gosh, there's going to be a whole bunch of great prison-related jobs coming to Canada.
Since the world's taking a big step backwards, I think it's time for a break.
I got to take a break. I got so excited for doing the show today, I forgot to put on a shirt. What the hell is wrong with me? We'll be right back after this.
It's 20 after the hour, and we have to take a short break, if you know what I mean. Please support these sponsors who support NORML Show Live.
Oh, have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. Have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would send you South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
When I was in England, I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it. And didn't inhale, and never tried it again.
I think you'd probably be a lot cooler if you had, Mr. President.
Said, hey, do you have to go and kiss? Sure would be a lot cooler if you did. Lie, don't hide it. Oh, lie, don't hide it. Just lie, don't hide it. Find love right now.
It's time for your daily Toker Tunes, the best in 420 friendly music from all genres that uplifts, entertains, and informs the public. Today we bring you tunes for Electric Tuesday, our segment featuring the best of modern electric music in the genres of dance, new age, house, and experimental. Brought to you by Sarah Kant in Boston, Massachusetts, and Sarah Kant Photography. If you'd like to submit your song to be played on NORML Show Live, send it to us at stash@normal.org. Now here's some more great independent marijuana music for today's Daily Toker Tunes.
Hey folks, Radical Russ back here. We're still waiting on Sarah to return from her maternity leave. If she's going to, I'm not even sure, but we'll find out. In the meantime, I'm still bringing you your Electric Tuesday music, and according to this band's album page, they were inspired early by music from the likes of Massive Attack, Boards of Canada, Depeche Mode, and Philip Glass. The band Home Video intertwined the classically trained sensibilities of Gross with the confessional and at times existential lyrics of Rufino, which doesn't make sense to me at all, but I'm sure some younger person with heavy eyeliner can explain it to me. The name of this song is The Smoke, and it makes it my pick for this Electric Tuesday. Just let the smoke billow over you while you stare deeply at the hypnotic album cover. Old school Moog synthesizer sounds blend with acoustic guitar and a gentle groove on this song, The Smoke, by Home Video. You can get this song and others at our blog, stash.normal.org. Just look in the main menu under Media and then Toker Tunes. Again, this is Home Video with The Smoke.
Tunes at the Stash blog by surfing to stash.normal.org and choosing media, and then Toker Tunes from the main menu.
Starfish Designs, makers of the original Gandalf.
I'm Radical Russ, and when I want to relax, I always have my 17-inch long original Gandalf from Starfish Designs nearby. The hand-blown borosilicate glass is strong and easy to clean, and the design is sleek and sophisticated. Starfish Designs are available from Bend, Oregon at a glass retailer near you. For locations, call 541-788-GLASS. That's 541-788-4527.
Just say no.
No matter what you call it, it's a huge part of popular culture.
Where'd you learn that, Cheech? Drug school.
You don't need weed school. You just need a copy of the new book, Pot Culture, the A to Z Guide to Stoner Language and Life.
Hey, this is great, man.
Even if you never smoked marijuana.
I never used marijuana. Sorry.
Don't think you smoked marijuana.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two and didn't inhale.
Or you used to smoke marijuana.
I inhaled frequently. That was the point.
Pot Culture by former High Times editor Steve Bloom and Shirley Halperin will answer every question you ever had about marijuana culture.
Has that marijuana made it back up here yet?
Check out Pot Culture, the A to Z Guide to Stoner Language and Life at Amazon.com or visit potculturebook.com today.
Too bad, man. I just stopped smoking yesterday.
NORML stands for Reforming America's Prohibitionist Marijuana Laws, and that cannot happen without directly engaging our government and elected officials. Local NORML chapters and other affiliated activists relentlessly lobby our lawmakers for a change we can believe in and report on their strategies and progress in this segment we call Our Government at Work.
Gary Johnson made news this week by admitting he had smoked pot from 2005 to 2008. Here he is in his own words from the NORML conference.
Thanks. So, I wanted all of you to know that I am an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur my entire life. I started a one-man handyman business in Albuquerque in 1974, and in 1994 actually had 1,000 employees, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, pipe fitting. Really, the American dream come true. It was based on the simplest of notions. I always showed up on time, did what I said I would do, did a little bit more than what I said I would do for people. And the business grew. And in 1999, I sold that business. Nobody lost their job, and it's doing better than ever. I view my venture into politics as entrepreneurial. I had never been involved in politics prior to running for governor of New Mexico. I went and I introduced myself to the Republican Party a couple of weeks before I announced, And what they said was, hey, we like you, we like what you've got to say, but you need to know that you'll never get elected in a state that's 2-to-1 Democrat as governor. It's just not possible. Well, I got elected. And I'd like to think it was on the basis of what I had to say prior to the election, which was, look, this was going to be about issues first, politics last. It was going to be about best product, best service, lowest price. Everything was going to be a cost-benefit analysis. What are we spending and what are we getting for what we're spending? I think more significant than getting elected was the fact that I got reelected. And I got reelected in a state that was 2-to-1 Democrat. And I got reelected, I think, on the basis of having way over-delivered on that first set of promises. There were some things that I was known for nationally. One was I vetoed 750 bills while I was governor of New Mexico. I had thousands of line-item vetoes while I was governor of New Mexico. Now, putting that into context, that was like more than the other 49 governors in the country combined. Now, if you're thinking, well, gee, this is a no governor, this is somebody who says no to everything, I would argue that what I was looking at was public policy that was equal for everybody, as opposed to public policy that benefited individuals, groups, corporations that were well connected politically, as opposed to legislation that would affect everyone equally. And that's kind of the way that I viewed things. So I ended up vetoing billions of dollars worth of new spending in this context of let's spend money that everybody gets a benefit out of as opposed to just a few. Now, again, what I think is really significant is that I got reelected by a bigger margin than I got elected the first time in a state that was 2-to-1 Democrat with this notion. And I think people saw good stewardship of tax dollars. So it wasn't about saying no as much as it was, again, a government that functions for all of us. Another thing that I was known for nationally, really, I'm a free market guy. Best product, best service, lowest price. So when it came to education, I espoused bringing competition to public education. I espoused a school voucher system in New Mexico for 6 straight years that, in my opinion, bringing competition to public education would improve public education dramatically. Bringing educational entrepreneurs to bear on a system, in my opinion, would result in a better product, a better service at a lower price. Another thing that I was known for nationally, and it was in 1999, it was the start of my second term, I really wanted to take a hard look at the war on drugs. And I wanted to include legalization as a potential alternative to what we were currently doing. So when I started that out in 1999, right off the bat, I needed to look at Holland, of course, which according to the government had drug use that was skyrocketing and had violence and crime that was just off the charts. And it all had to do with drug use. Well, come to find out, Holland has 60% the drug use is that of the United States. That's on a per capita basis. That's marijuana, that's hard drugs, that's kids, and that's adults. Looking at this issue, after a very short amount of time, I came to the conclusion that 90% of the drug problem was prohibition-related, not use-related, and that is not to discount the problems with use and abuse, but that ought to be the focus. So I came at this from a cost-benefit analysis. Half of what we spend on law enforcement, half of what we spend on the courts, and half of what we spend on the prisons is drug-related. And to what end? Well, we're arresting 1.8 million people a year in this country on drug-related crime. We have 4 times the incarceration rate on a percentage basis of any country in the world. In second place is New Zealand. 4 times. We have, 2.4 million people in this country incarcerated. Now, let me put a face to that. I was in Des Moines, Iowa a couple of weeks ago, and I'm talking to this young man who I'm going to guess was in his mid-30s. And he got arrested and charged. He was arrested for possession of a gram of marijuana. He was arrested and charged with the intent to distribute that gram of marijuana to his 17-year-old daughter, and he was sentenced to 25 years in prison. And he had just gotten out of prison, having served over 1 year in prison for that. So that's the face to this 1.8 million arrests. I figure there are 30 million convicted felons in this country that, but for our drug laws, would otherwise be tax-paying, law-abiding citizens. And if you want to count individuals that have just smoked pot and not been caught, I being one of those, there are 100 million Americans out there that, but for our drug laws, would otherwise be tax-paying, law-abiding citizens. So after examining this issue for a fairly short amount of time, in 1999, I advocated the legalization of marijuana. Control it, regulate it, tax it. When it comes to all the other drugs, I advocate harm reduction strategies, which is basically looking at the problem as a health problem first, not as a criminal justice problem. Looking at it from the standpoint of the things that we really care about, reducing death, disease, crime, corruption. I got out of office January 1 of 2003. I was term limited. I am a firm believer in term limits. I'm a firm believer that we're all served by politicians that can't spend a whole lot of time in office. I think politicians do good things as a result of being limited in their time in office. But I find myself about 14 months ago being outraged over what's happening in this country. And I'm not laying blame on Obama. I'm not laying blame on Democrats, because Democrats and Republicans can share in just where we're at right now. But where we're at right now is we are bankrupt. We are bankrupt. 43 cents out of every dollar that we're spending right now is borrowed. And I think the system is really on a verge of collapse. And so spending needs to be slashed. How much? Well, 43% if you just want to balance revenues with expenditures. So when it comes to Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, these areas need to be reformed if they're going to be viable going into the future. They have to be. Our entire future depends on that. We have a $13 trillion deficit right now. We have $100 trillion in unfunded entitlement liabilities. Promises that were made that should have never been made. These issues have to be addressed. They have to be addressed now, and in my opinion, we're moving in the wrong direction. Spending is out of control. Taxes are going up across the board when we should be looking at slashing spending, when we should understand that by reducing taxes, we'll actually grow the economy by doing that. I'm a free market guy. I really believe in the free market. When it comes to education, again, I think unleashing educational entrepreneurs on a system with no competition would unbelievably improve education. Healthcare. Look, I think healthcare is about as far removed from free market as it possibly could be. And if we just had free market reforms, the government eliminating impediments for healthcare entrepreneurs that would want to enter into the system to deliver a better product, a better service at a lower price, would be enormous. And let me draw some examples. I had some stitches last year in Taos, 7 stitches on my forehead. There's no advertised pricing for stitches, so you go in and you get your stitches and $750. And I just have a sense if there were advertised pricing for stitches, and if physicians' assistants were able to get into the business of doing stitches, that I probably could have got that done in Albuquerque at a clinic specializing in stitches for $75 as opposed to $750. And I'd have put a Band-Aid on it and gotten in a car and driven down to Albuquerque. And when it comes to insurance, what we have now is national health care insurance. I don't really want to buy that. I kind of want to pay as you go, but I want to buy insurance for catastrophic illness or injury. I think that it would be a lot less money. I had envisioned, when it came to health care reform, I had envisioned Gallbladders Are Us. I'd envision clinics specializing in gallbladder surgery at thousands of dollars as opposed to tens of thousands of dollars. We're getting on airplanes right now to go to India to have heart surgery, at tens of thousands as opposed to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then a free market system when it comes to health care. Look, medical marijuana fits in that area, marijuana. And I espouse legalizing marijuana, but legalized marijuana is a huge alternative to spending thousands of dollars on prescription drugs for an individual over a lifetime, or tens of thousands of dollars, as opposed to marijuana, which might make a huge difference. And let me draw an analogy with regard to the health insurance that we have right now in this country. Why don't we have grocery insurance? Really? What a great idea. We wouldn't have to pay for groceries. Groceries are essential to us living. So we could go into the grocery store, we'd have grocery insurance. There wouldn't be any prices on any of the counters because prices don't matter. We don't pay for the groceries. Grocery insurance does. Would we buy ground round or would we buy fillets? Would we pick up ground round or fillets? Well, we'd pick up fillets because we don't pay for it. Grocery insurance does. And we went up to the checkout stand. What about the grocery store owner? What about the prices? Well, he's jacked the prices up so high because nobody pays for groceries. Grocery insurance does. Well, I think that's what we've got right now in our healthcare system today. And I think it's going to result in just a whole lot more people being dropped on a system with no added capacity. In my opinion, it's going to raise costs significantly, and it's going to result in rationing. And then looking at costs in this country and looking at national defense. I am a strong believer in national defense. I think that the government has an obligation to provide for a strong national defense. But I would argue that our defense, that our security is not being threatened in either Iraq or Afghanistan. I would have been on record prior to us going into Iraq saying, you know what, we don't need to do this. We have the military surveillance capability to see Iraq roll out any weapons of mass destruction. We can go in and we can surgically address that situation militarily. I thought if we went into Iraq, we would find ourselves mired in a civil war to which there would be no end. Afghanistan, you know what? Originally, I thought that was completely warranted. I thought that was about a strike. It was a strike. Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, but they're not there anymore, and we still are 10 years later. We're building roads, schools, bridges, highways, and hospitals in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we're borrowing 43 cents out of every dollar to do that. We're engaged in this process of nation building. Don't we have our own nation to build? Out of the dollar... Out of the dollar that's being spent worldwide right now on military spending, 50 cents of that dollar is being spent by the United States, and we're 5% of the world's population. I think that all this stuff needs to be reassessed. We're part of treaties that were negotiated 70 years ago. Today is a new world reality, and that new world reality is we can't continue to pay for this because we're bankrupt, and we're going to be of no good to any country worldwide bankrupt. You know, another hot-button issue of the day right now is immigration. And immigration, I think that there are a couple of things that we could do that would dramatically improve the situation with immigration. One is legalize marijuana. Arguably, 75% of the border violence goes away as a result of legalizing marijuana. It's estimated that 75% of the Mexican drug cartel activity revolves around marijuana. Secondly, look, make it easy for immigrants that enter into this country that want to work to get a legal work visa. Just do that. Legal work visa, Social Security card, background check, pay taxes. We need to have immigration reform. Immigration reform needs to be about work, not welfare, and we can look to within our own country also. We need to, if we can, we need to work. We shouldn't be sitting at home collecting welfare checks. The notion of putting the National Guard arm in arm across 1,600 miles of border, the notion of building fences, I just think it would be a lot of money spent without any real benefit. Make it easy to get a work visa. And then, you know, I think I know something about this because I was a border governor. There was another border governor who actually knew something about this, who actually had all the right ideas when it came to immigration, and that was George Bush. And he just didn't get around to implementing what it was that should have been implemented. He talked about setting up a period. He called it amnesty. Amnesty is not about citizenship. Amnesty is about a grace period. I call it a grace period whereby illegal immigrants can get a legal work visa, and those are the things that we care about. We don't want crime committed in this country. We want taxes paid, and we don't want it to be about welfare. We want it to be about a work. So in December of last year, I formed Our America Initiative. The idea was to try and put a voice to these issues that I think really are the issues of the day. That we do look at everything from a cost-benefit analysis, that we really can improve the world, that there's some optimism here, that there's an awareness right now that exists, that I think we can right the financial ship, that this country can be viable into the future, that all of us give up a little bit to have something as opposed to us losing everything, which is where it's at right now. The optimism is that we are recognizing this, and that the optimism is that we return to the notion of what this country has always been about, which is liberty and freedom and the personal responsibility that goes along with that. I wouldn't be here in front of you right now. I wouldn't be here in front of you right now if what I'm saying is being said. I wouldn't be here right now if I didn't think that what I'm saying is important and needs to be said. There is no they that's going to come to our rescue out there. There's you, and there's me, and I really do think that we can make a difference. And I really want to thank all of you for your activism. I want to thank all of you for your activism on this issue, because once people connect this issue, then this notion of liberty and freedom and the personal responsibility that goes along with that transcends dozens of other issues, all for the betterment of this country. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Former Governor Gary Johnson at the NORML National Conference 2010 this last October. We'll be right back.
Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back after a word from these 420 friendly sponsors. Wait a minute. This is Internet radio. There are no dials here.
Hey, this is Willie Nelson for NORML. I smoke pot and I like it a lot. I learned a long time ago that marijuana is a lot safer than alcohol. There's nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults. It's time we stopped arresting and started respecting those who smoke marijuana responsibly. To learn what you can do to help, contact NORML at NORML.org or call toll-free 888-67-NORML.
The effects of marijuana prohibition are felt by all Americans in every walk of life, regardless of race, creed, color, religion, social status, wealth, gender, sexual orientation, or even one's use or non-use of marijuana. As the marijuana smokers lobby, NORML hears the stories of these average Americans and brings them to the attention of our policymakers and our fellow citizens in this segment we call NORML Newsmakers.
Welcome back, everyone, and we're going all the way down to the state of Florida. Still recovering from the NORML Key West Legal Seminar is NORML board member and also member of the NORML Legal Committee, Dan Viets. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Russ.
Hey, I wanted to get you on the line because we'd come across a story on today's Newswire about Camp Zoe in Missouri. This is a campground often used for music venues or musical festivals that we're all fond of. And they're being attacked now by the U.S. Attorney's Office and the DEA. And I wanted you to give a chance to tell our listeners what's happening there in Missouri.
Well, as you say, Camp Zoe has been a wonderful venue for concerts and cultural gatherings. It's in the heart of the Ozarks, some of the most beautiful country in our state. And the leader of the band, which is known as the Schwag, Grateful Dead tribute band, Jimmy Tebow, purchased this land several years ago, still mortgaged, of course. They're still paying for it. And about 350 acres. the Office of the U.S. Attorney has filed a petition to forfeit this land following a raid, the execution of search warrants on the property. They found nothing illegal, apparently nothing illegal during the raid on the property. But their theory for forfeiting this land is that other people have been known to commit crimes, specifically drug crime, on the property. And so it's a rather indirect attempt to take property by the federal government, something that would not be under Missouri law, by the way, and some other states have some protections built into their laws on this forfeiture business. But under federal law and under the laws of most states, you don't even have to be accused of a crime to be threatened with the loss of your property.
Have they had any incidents in the past at other events? I understand Schwagstock is one that's held there. Were there other events held there where the police could definitely point and said, yes, we had X number of arrests, or we got Y amount of drugs that we seized? Anything they can legitimately point to?
Well, I suppose they could probably point to some isolated incidents. And indeed, the irony of the situation is that Mr. Tebow and the band have asked for law enforcement to be present on the property, have actually invited them to be present on the property, and they have made good faith efforts to discourage any illegal activity. But to hold them responsible for the acts of others, which they have neither condoned nor encouraged, and to try to take their land from them because other people committed crimes on it is a very dangerous precedent.
Yeah, this reminds me of the tactic in the I'm sorry to interrupt, but it reminds me of the tactic in the 80s when they were using the Rave Act to try to shut down these warehouses that would host the rave dances.
That's right. That's right.
Is this the same law they're using?
I think it is. I think the same law or similar law. They're attempting to I suppose they're attempting to intimidate music venues throughout the country. And, one is prompted to wonder, what if a city park is the site of illegal drug activity? Is the federal government going to come in and take Forest Park away from St. Louis, take city parks away from cities throughout the country because people commit crimes there? It's a slippery slope.
Yeah, this is the asset forfeiture that we talk about in numerous stories. We covered the story of Bernie Ellis out in Tennessee, where, similar situation where the federal government is taking a man's land, his farmland, for alleged illegal activity that they never managed to prove. It is a dangerous, slippery slope. And I'm wondering when, Mr. Tebow, when these people have to defend this, and again, we're speaking with Dan Vietz, NORML board member, and when they have to defend this, how long of a process is this, and how much can it take out of their, personal finances?
Well, there's no limit to the amount of money they may spend defending themselves and trying to keep their land. One of the ironies of the situation is that the feds marched in and took all the money from the receipts of their final event of the summer, the Halloween weekend event, and then they went into town and took all the money out of their bank accounts.
Right.
And so it becomes very difficult to defend oneself when the government has just taken all of the money that you have. It makes it very difficult to defend oneself.
Yeah, as I had written this up, I had written that, sometimes they charge the money with the crime, and then you have to find a way to hire a lawyer to defend your money when you don't have it to hire a lawyer. It's the total catch-22 situation that the government gets away with in this. That's because, of course, they have the unlimited resources to prosecute this as long as they need to.
Right. One of the things that makes this so pernicious, so dangerous, is that the proceeding is regarded as a civil proceeding, not a criminal matter. And so some of the rights that we enjoy under the Constitution that apply to criminal matters, the right to an attorney, the right to be proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, those protections don't apply to a civil proceeding. And the government is well aware of that. They're well aware of the fact that when they take someone's money, it makes it very difficult for that person to mount a legal defense.
Yeah, and it seems like these actions are always taken against the counterculture, things like the Rainbow Gathering or Schwagstock. You don't often see them going after, say, a NASCAR rally or a beer garden for where there may be illegal drinking going on by minors. They're not seizing those venues.
That's right. That's exactly right. It certainly does have the appearance of some kind of a culture war in the mind of somebody. And I don't know who initiated this. We have a lot of questions that are not being answered as yet. But the fact is that the resources of the federal government can be better spent on almost any other undertaking.
Mm-hmm. Is there any effort afoot to end this practice of civil asset forfeiture through lawsuits or activism or legislation being proposed that you know of?
Well, it'll take legislation. It'll take an act of Congress to stop this. I'm not aware of any movement in Congress at this point to stop this activity. However, this is one of the abuses that may move some members of Congress to initiate that type of reform. We certainly hope so.
And I do believe that for people looking for information on forfeiture, there is a website, if I remember correctly. I'm just going to look it up here to verify, but I think it's fear.org. That's right, FEAR, fear.org. Forfeiture endangers American rights. And you can learn all about the police and prosecutors, the stories of victims who've been fighting against this travesty of American justice. Again, we're speaking with Dan Viets, who's a member of the NORML Board of Directors and also the NORML Legal Committee. And anything else you'd like to tell our listeners about this story?
Well, yeah, there's another new group that's just formed recently called Americans for Forfeiture Reform. Oh. And if you Google that phrase, you'll also find some interesting information specific to this case, but also about forfeiture in general.
Americans for Forfeiture Reform. We'll put that up on our blog as well at stash.normal.org. People can look that up. And you just, on another quick tangent here, you just finished up with the NORML Key West Legal Seminar. Any new stories or information that our listeners might be interested in from the Key West gathering?
Well, I don't know that probably the biggest breaking story there is the fact that in Maine, and we are afraid that in Arizona shortly, the State Bar Association has declared, in Maine at least, that it would be a violation of the Code of Ethics for an attorney to help a dispensary to incorporate because the dispensary would be operating in violation of federal law, even though it's clearly within state law. So this is probably the biggest issue that's developing right now. And the state of Arizona's Bar Association has indicated that they're considering issuing a similar opinion. And so there was a great deal of concern about that. And we hope that that'll be resolved in the near future in our favor, of course.
Yeah, that could be a big blow to the burgeoning dispensary industries that are taking root in Arizona and the people that are trying to work in Maine. It's kind of ironic. They want us to try to follow these laws, but they don't allow us counsel to be able to follow them. That's very strange. Dan, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for joining us so much here on NORML Show Live. Dan Viets from Missouri NORML and the NORML Board of Directors. And take care, and we'll see you again sometime, and have a safe flight back from Florida.
Thank you, Russ, very much. Adios.
All right, folks, we're coming back with Hour 2. We'll talk about Gary Johnson. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is NORML Show Live, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Take it on one more time. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it.